Okay, good evening. Welcome to this Zoom webinar forum with the candidates for Bremerton Municipal Court Judge. This event is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Kitsap. My name is Linda Streisguth, and I will be the moderator for tonight's event. The League of Women Voters is proud to be a nonpartisan organization, neither supporting nor opposing candidates and political parties. The League envisions a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. Questions have been submitted to the League by voters through our website. We've consolidated those, plus others that the public has contributed into the questions I'll ask of tonight's candidates. The questions will cover a range of topics and issues pertinent to the City of Bremerton. Our candidates for Municipal Court Judge are Thomas Weaver and Tracy Flood. Thanks to both of you for stepping up to offer your skills and talents in service to our city. You deserve our deep respect, and we ask that during this forum, you maintain civility with one another. Candidates, during tonight's forum, each of you will be given 90 seconds to make an opening statement. We will go in the order your name appears on the ballot. Then I'll begin the questions. Both of you in a rotating order will have 60 seconds to respond. If you've answered a question and have time remaining, you can speak about a previous question or clarify a statement. At the end of the forum, each candidate will again have 90 seconds to make a closing statement. And if you run out of time, you can finish your sentence, but we ask that you finish the time when you have finished that sentence. Our timekeeper, as you're aware, will maintain an electronic clock that is visible to both of you. So now it's time to begin our opening statements. 90 seconds, please, and we'll begin with Mr. Weaver.
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this judicial forum. I am excited at the prospect of being your next Bremerton Municipal Court Judge. I have been preparing my entire career for this position. I am the most qualified candidate for the job. My candidacy is community-based, and I have a proven track record of being fair and impartial. I am qualified. My 28-year career as a lawyer has prepared me for the types of cases I will be presiding over in Bremerton. I have been lead counsel in approximately 400 jury trials encompassing almost every aspect of criminal law. I believe approximately 1/3 of those jury trials have been in courts of limited jurisdiction and include DUIs, domestic violence, reckless driving, fish and game violations, and tribal issues. I have also been lead counsel in over 350 appeals that have resulted in nearly 100 published appellate cases, including 19 in the Washington Supreme Court. I am community-based. I have lived in Bremerton for 40 years, and I am a graduate of Central Kitsap High School. I have an office on the Manette side of the bridge. I have volunteered at the Bremerton YMCA and Kitsap Legal Services in Bremerton. I have a proven track record of being fair and impartial. I have worked as a judge pro tem in Bremerton Municipal Court, and I am regularly called upon by the Kitsap Superior Court as a court-appointed arbiter. I look forward to being your next Bremerton Municipal Court Judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. And Ms. Flood, it's now time for your opening statement.
Thank you, League of Women Voters, for this opportunity to share my story and my candidacy with our local voters. I'm Tracy Flood, and I'm running to be your next Bremerton Municipal Court Judge. Bremerton is my home. I came to Kitsap County from the Windy City in 1989 while serving on active duty in the Navy. I graduated from Olympic College with my AA degree. I went on to the University of Washington, and I have 2 BA degrees, sociology and political science. I went on to Seattle University School of Law, the last graduating class downtown Tacoma, and received my JD and recently received my LLM after returning to school. I have served throughout Kitsap County and Washington State in many capacities. That includes serving on the Washington State Board of Governors. Kitsap County, I have served as Vice President of the Washington State Bar Foundation, and as a specialized examiner, I've done work for the last 14 years as a pro tem judge in 4 municipal courts and 7 district courts. My background and experience is very diverse, and you'll learn more about that as we go along. I am the most qualified candidate. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. And now we'll begin our questions. As a reminder, each of you will have 60 seconds to respond, and we'll begin with Ms. Flood. What motivated you to run for municipal court judge, and why are you seeking election to this office?
My investment in Kitsap County goes back to, again, when I came here as a veteran, attending Olympic College at night. I began my service in the community, serving as a student government representative. That gave me the passion to say, this is where I want to be. This is where my heart is. And continuing on with the U.S. Department of Labor as a specialized examiner for 8 years, serving our most vulnerable populations, looking at the needs as president of the NAACP that we have here in Kitsap County, saying we should have leaders that reflect what our community looks like. We should have leaders that reflect the diversity that Bremerton represents. We need servant leaders. That motivated me to be here today.
I'm sorry, I lost audio with, I assume.
Sorry, a technical error on my part.
That's okay.
Yes, same question, Mr. Weaver.
So as I stated, I am a 40-year resident of Bremerton. I'm invested in this community. When I started my own law practice in 2005, I chose to open my office in Bremerton in Manette. In the 40 years that I've lived in this community, I have increasingly seen the transfer of drug and mental health issues onto the police and onto the courts. The Port Orchard courts have tried to address this with drug courts and mental health courts. Bremerton Municipal Court has neither. One of the things that I am hoping to do once I become Bremerton Municipal Court judge is to start both a drug court and a mental health court in order to address the mental health and drug issues that we're all seeing throughout the city on a daily basis. The city is crying out for this need, and I hope to address it.
Thank you. Our next question, we'll start with Mr. Weaver. What qualifications or experience make you the best candidate for this position?
I think to a large extent, at least I touched on that in my opening. I have been a lawyer for 28 years, and my practice has been almost entirely in the area of criminal law. The Bremerton Municipal Court is primarily a criminal court. It addresses misdemeanors and quasi-criminal matters like domestic violence protection orders. That's what I do on a day-to-day basis, and I have been doing for 28 years. I also have an extensive experience in addressing legal issues, both at the trial level and on appeal. The appellate issues that I have litigated in the courts of appeals in Washington Supreme Court include search and seizure, speedy trial, the right to confrontation, confessions, issues of statutory construction, rules of evidence, and sentencing issues. There's not going to be any issue that comes before me that I won't have extensive familiarity with and experience. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Flood.
Thank you. I'm a veteran. I've been a single mom. I'm a mentor. I'm a small business owner, and I'm a community volunteer. For the last 14 years, I have had the pleasure of serving as a pro tem judge, again, in 4 municipal courts, 7 district courts, the Office of Administrative Hearing. I've been a specialized examiner for 8 years at the U.S. Department of Labor. I've done and completed and worked as a dispute resolution center mediation specialist, completing my training at the King County Dispute Resolution Center. I've practiced for the last 12 years. I've practiced for over 20 years in different areas, civil and criminal, not limiting myself to one area. I've been a public defender. I've worked as a mental health public defender at Western State Hospital. I've been a CASA. I've been a volunteer in several areas, and this makes me qualified and diverse.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Ms. Flood. What traits or skills will you need to improve upon if you become judge? And how will you do so?
I consider myself a lifelong learner, and this is a very exciting question. A couple of years ago, I got to spend time with Justice Sotomayor here in Seattle. And one of the things she said to me is every night before she goes to bed, she makes sure that she's learned something new, that she has checked in with her friends and family. So a lifelong learner is very important. We're required as lawyers to have continuing CLE credits. I went back and got my LLM in elder law to address the special needs that we have in our communities for our most vulnerable populations. And over the last 18 months, I have served in nursing homes, at the Veterans Administration, our elderly population. I created Vital Communications, a group that we have been addressing the needs that have been raised during this pandemic to, again, our most vulnerable populations, our elderly, our minority populations, our underrepresented, our low income. That is why I'm here.
And Mr. Weaver.
Thank you. I think the transition to being a judge on the bench is going to be relatively smooth. The area that I would identify that I am going to be needing to work on is an area that came as a surprise to me when I decided to run for this position. And that is the fact that Bremerton Municipal Court is a one-judge jurisdiction where the judge acts not just as a judge, but as the chief administrator for the court, which means that he has to be able to work with the city council and the mayor for budgeting issues. He has to be able to address issues that come up with between staff issues, things like that. I do have a small law office. I have employees. These are things that are not completely unfamiliar to me, but this will be a larger office than what I'm used to, and that's going to be a small adjustment.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Mr. Weaver. What changes would you like to make in the court or court operations if elected?
I think I've just alluded to this. The most important thing that I want to do is to create mental health and a drug court at the Bremerton Municipal Court. That's going to take some time. Anything of that nature is going to require resources, money resources, people resources, time resources. That's going to require adjusting the calendar. It's going to require going to the legislature for funding. The legislature / city council. It's going to require having people appointed to do the job. Fortunately, the staff at the Bremerton Municipal Court is one of the best staffs that I've ever seen in any courthouse I've ever been in. The probation officer there, Ian Cohen, the other employees, Heather Hunt at the clerk's office, they're wonderful people, and I have every confidence that through a team approach, we can get these things done.
And Ms. Flood.
Can I get you to repeat the question?
Yes. What changes would you like to make in the court or court operations if elected?
I think it's important as a court that I practice in to come in and do an inventory of things that are working and things that are not working. I am familiar with our probation officer as well as all of the staff that is in Bremerton Municipal Court. Also that we have a sitting commissioner that works with the sitting judge. And it's important to know that as a pro tem judge for the last 14 years, again, I have presided over very similar cases. That includes pretrial conferences, disposition, sentencing, bench warrant quashes, traffic infractions, both criminal and civil. And when we look at my experience of being in Shoreline, Redmond, Bellevue, Auburn, even in Kitsap County at Port Orchard District Court and the City Municipal Court, taking in all of that diversity, coming in and saying, these are some things that I see in other courts that are working, and definitely a behavioral health court, which I just recently sat in and presided over for Jefferson County, filling in for the judge there.
Thank you. Our next question, we'll start with you, Tracy. A recent 3-year Washington State Gender and Justice Commission study found that gender and race inequities affect the administration of justice in Washington State trial courts. Give an example of how such inequities affect justice in municipal courts and what you plan to do to eliminate such inequities.
The study is one that is kind of a part two. The first study was done in 1989. And I'm familiar with the work of the Gender and Justice Committee, as well as the Superior Court Judges Association, Judge Keenan, who wrote Chapter 15 regarding legal financial obligations. He is one of my judges that have endorsed me. There's a revolving door. That revolving door, we know, is linked to disparities in sentencing. And one of the things that I think is important is being able to track what's happening in the courts. And right now, that's not happening. One of the other things that's important is to make sure that those with similar crimes, if you've got a traffic infraction and the other person's got a traffic infraction, and then there's both no criminal history, that they're being offered the same information. How do we do that? We begin to take an inventory of what's happening, track it, and then we can address it on the level and scale that the study has done.
Thank you. And Mr. Weaver?
Thank you. First of all, I was recently appointed by Supreme Court Justice Cheryl Gordon McLeod to that commission, and I have been serving for the past couple of months on that commission. And my experience as a trial lawyer has been extensive, involving issues involving race and gender, as I've represented hundreds of people, thousands of people of various ethnic and racial backgrounds. The Washington Supreme Court recently enacted General Rule 37, which is a rule that is designed to address the racial and gender inequalities in voir dire, jury selection. In my capacity as an appellate lawyer, I was instrumental in the passage of that rule, working in my capacity as an amicus curiae attorney in support of it. And I see I'm out of time.
Thank you. Well, our next question begins with you, Mr. Weaver, and it is an opportunity to elaborate further on any plans you have to improve access to justice in Bremerton Municipal Courts.
Well, like I said, the staff at Bremerton is wonderful, and the important thing is that we be able to address people who come in whatever capacity they're coming in, and treat them with equality. I was briefly talking about General Rule 37, which the community is probably not aware of, but it's a very, very important rule. It's the first of its kind that I know of in the country that's designed to further the goal of eliminating racial bias in jury selection. I am the chair of the amicus curiae committee for an organization that helped sponsor that rule, and the committee that I chair is was very influential in suggesting to the Washington Supreme Court how the rules should be written and how it should be implemented. I'm very proud of the work that we have done on that committee, and the rule is relatively new, and I am very anxious to see it implemented further. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Flood.
When we look at what is currently happening and continuing to look forward for how do we improve access to justice, one of the things that is so important is implementing rules and things that don't look at equality alone, but equity. Understanding the difference in the two is so important as a judicial officer. We have the legislation with the legal financial obligations. I contacted Bremerton courts when Port Orchard first began to say, we're going to have these forgiveness days. And the prosecutor at the time, Buskirk, said that there were no amnesty days going on. That is one of the things that I want to see. Also looking at night court, opportunities for people not to have to be put out and taken off from work, continuing Zoom hearings, and most importantly, understanding that during this pandemic, jury trials in Port Orchard have been stayed, but not in Bremerton, and that's important.
Our next question we'll start with Ms. Flood. And my question is, do you believe trial judges should be elected or appointed? And please explain why you have this opinion.
I think that it's important for our community to choose our judges. Our people in our community should have choices. Our voices as voters is so important. Here, we're at the League of Women Voters Forum. It is so key to be able to say who you want to choose, not anything dictated to you. And I am so happy that I have over 100 community endorsements from community partners, over 20 businesses that have endorsed my campaign from work that they've seen me do in the community. So when it comes to voting or appointments, voting is where we should be. And I think that it's important for the voters to know that in 2018, there was an issue brought up of saying that the Bremerton voters, can I finish my sentence? I didn't see the clock stop.
You can finish your sentence.
Okay, thank you. That it's important for the Bremerton voters to have input as to their leaders.
Thank you. And Mr. Weaver.
Historically, the election of judges in Washington State, as well as on the West Coast, was part of the populist movement that occurred at the turn of the 20th century. Washington voters want to be able to elect their judges, and I respect that and I support that. The populist movement led to the creation of initiatives, referendums, recall petitions. Oregon was the first state to elect a senator even before the passage of the 17th Amendment. Because Washington voters want to elect their judges, I support that. It's part of our history, it's part of who we are, and I see no reason to change that.
Thank you. Our next question begins with you, Mr. Weaver. How do you envision using virtual appearances in your court after the pandemic ends?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of Zoom. It's really hard to assess a person's credibility when they're over Zoom. It's hard to determine whether a person's being truthful or not. Zoom does have its place, however. I think for routine pretrial hearings, continuances, that sort of thing, I think that it has its place. But when things when the rubber hits the road on important issues, I guess, I would prefer that the person be in court. And I will probably try and implement some sort of rule that balances those two competing interests. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Flood?
I believe I stated before that I think it's important to look at night court, continuing Zoom court after the pandemic, that access to justice is really key and what we need to do for Bremerton Municipal Court. Bremerton Municipal Court is the court that is full-time in Kitsap County. Unlike Port Orchard, Bainbridge Island, they're part-time courts. And it's also unlike what we have downtown in District Court and Superior Court. We serve within the city of Bremerton, our most diverse city in Kitsap County. So looking at what the needs are of the Bremerton community to make sure that they can have due process and they can be heard is so key. And unlike my opponent, I haven't changed my opinion about the people of Bremerton concerning voting and the right for a voice, and whether it's a progressive movement or not, that candidates are elected versus appointed.
Thank you. Our next question starts with Ms. Flood. And I'm going to ask, what are the most effective ways to hold offenders accountable?
Accountability is important from the top down and the bottom up on every level. When we look at issues that come into the courts in Bremerton, are they because the person has drug issues, mental health issues? That's where it becomes important for us to have sufficient funding, because we all know that the courts are underfunded. And as a person who has grant writing experience, being able to partner with our tribal courts and other courts and get funding on a federal level to bring in to establish these therapeutic courts and not just promise them, that is so important, because we know that there's only so much money that's coming out of the state legislature for our courts. But how do we expand that in partnership? How do we stop the revolving door and make sure that those that need to be punished to the full extent of the law are punished to the full extent of the law, and those that need therapeutic courts have that option?
Thank you. Mr. Weaver?
The criminal justice system serves a variety of competing interests. On the one hand, the criminal justice system has an obligation to be punitive in certain circumstances. The criminal justice system has an obligation to prevent people from being able to go out and commit similar types of offenses. I think particularly in the Bremerton context of people who are repeat DUIs or repeat domestic violence perpetrators. The criminal justice system has an obligation to deter people from committing crimes, both people who haven't committed crimes and also people who have committed crimes to deter them from continuing to commit crimes. But they also have an obligation to provide rehabilitation. These are very competing interests, and the goal here is to balance these competing interests on a case-by-case basis, which is where the mental health and the drug courts come in for first-time offenders and more punitive sanctions for repeat offenders. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question for Mr. Weaver. Describe your experience with courts of limited jurisdiction. What percentage of your practice is representation of litigants in courts of limited jurisdiction?
So courts of limited jurisdiction are the district courts and municipal courts of this state. My first job out of law school was as a public defender in a district court where I did approximately my first 50 jury trials. I have continued to work in courts of limited jurisdiction continuously since that time. I spent about my first 2.5 years full-time in a district court. I I did a jury trial that finished yesterday in Kitsap County District Court. It was a bench trial where my client decided to waive jury because COVID will not allow jury trials. And I appeared in front of Judge Claire Bradley earlier this week and got a verdict yesterday. So I have extensive experience in courts of limited jurisdiction. As I said in my opening statement, I estimate about a third of my trials have been in courts of limited jurisdiction.
Thank you. And Ms. Flood?
My practice from being a Rule 9 started with Ron Ness in district court. So even before I got my bar license, I was representing clients in limited courts, limited jurisdictional courts in Port Orchard in district court. From there, I worked at the Crawford firm as a public defender. When I left there, I had a contract at Bainbridge Island Municipal for conflicts work for limited jurisdictional court, our municipal court. And I've had the pleasure of pro temping in courts of limited jurisdiction for 14 years. I have presided over numerous hundreds and hundreds of cases, as well as trials at the courts of limited jurisdiction, where I presided over them as the judge. This is my practice. Bremerton Municipal Court has been my practice, and I look forward to being the next Bremerton Municipal Court judge.
Thank you. This next question may touch on a few things that both of you have mentioned in your opening statement and in some of the prior responses, but I do want to ask, what is your connection to the city of Bremerton? Do you reside or maintain a physical office within the city limits? And we'll begin with Ms. Flood.
My office is downtown Bremerton on 4th Street, which is going to be the new Quincy Jones Square. So I'm really excited about that. And I do live within the city of Bremerton. And again, my ties to Bremerton is, I went to Olympic College. My first house was in Bremerton, I believe maybe about 3 blocks up the hill from Bremerton High School when I was on active duty Navy. So Bremerton is where my heart is, where I'm committed to the community. I have served around the state, and everything that I've learned and been involved in on a state level, I've brought those benefits back to Bremerton. As the NAACP president for Bremerton, the oldest civil rights organization in the nation, I have served in that role, working closely with our law enforcement, our business partners to better communications in our communities as a whole.
Thank you. That's time. Mr. Weaver.
Thank you. As I stated in my opening statement, I've been a Bremerton resident for 40 years. My parents moved to the community in 1981, and I attended both Central Kitsap Junior High and Central Kitsap High School. When I started my law practice in 2005, I bought an office building in Manette. It's on Wheaton Way, and it's still operating. I was there all day today. I've owned several homes in the Bremerton area, and I am currently living in Bremerton. So I have strong ties to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Weaver. How will you ensure that all litigants are treated fairly, impartially, and with respect in Bremerton Municipal Court?
I will treat them like I treat my clients. I have represented tens of thousands of people of every race, ethnic background, gender, sexual orientation. I judge cases based upon the merits of the case and not based upon who the person is. The criminal justice system, it is not designed to judge you based upon who you are, but what you do. And that's exactly what I will do as a Bremerton Municipal Court judge.
Thank you. Ms. Flood?
Can I get you to repeat the question? It kind of faded out on mine.
Yes. How will you ensure that all litigants are treated fairly, impartially, and with respect in Bremerton Municipal Court?
I will continue to do what I have been able to do as a pro tem judge for the last 14 years, to listen and to allow every person who comes before me to feel heard and to ensure that due process happens. When it's necessary to question counsel that is in front of me, if there's something that has the appearance of unfairness, I'm not afraid to do that. The status quo has been to rubber stamp what's come in front of the judge. It's important to make sure that there's fairness on all levels while we're making sure that the law is being enforced. But even more importantly, is to remember that our courts are accessible to all that come in front of us.
Thank you. Next question starts with Ms. Flood. What factors negatively affect judicial independence? And do you believe any of these factors are currently present in the Bremerton Municipal Court?
I believe that in my 20 plus years of practice, and even before I became an attorney, being involved in the community, we see so many issues that have been highlighted in the gender injustice study of Black women being portrayed as angry, hostile, if they are strong in their opinions and in their voice. It's not anything that's new. Those that have come before me, Al Colvin, Diane Robinson, Loxie Egan's, Alice Egan's, all face these things in history. And we know that historically, there are tones and undertones in areas of leadership that have not been forged before.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver?
Could I ask you to repeat the question, please?
Sure. What factors negatively affect judicial independence? And do you believe any of those factors are present in the Bremerton Municipal Court?
So I think the thing that tends to surprise judges the most in terms of their independence is that they cannot in every circumstance do what they believe is right, and instead they're required to do what is legal. The judge is required to follow the law regardless of whether the judge believes the law is a good law or not. If the law is not a good law, the remedy is to go back to the legislature and fix the law. Sometimes that results in judges having to make decisions that they personally disagree with. And I have experience, particularly in my appellate experience, working as an amicus curiae lawyer, in urging the court to follow the law as it's written and not necessarily as the law should have been written. It's up to the legislature to fix that.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Mr. Weaver. What steps, if any, can be taken to ensure that operators of motor vehicles in the state of Washington comply with financial responsibility laws?
This is a very dynamic area of the law right now. Actually, I'm sorry. The financial responsibility laws, are they referring to insurance? I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm not sure either. Let me restate the question and see if that helps. What steps, if any, can be taken to ensure that operators of motor vehicles in the state of Washington comply with financial responsibility laws?
Okay, well, I'm interpreting the question to be a reference to the requirement that drivers have insurance. And the law as it currently exists is that everybody driving a motor vehicle is required to have insurance. If they get caught driving without insurance, it's a very hefty ticket. I believe it's $525. If they get insurance between the time that they're caught driving without insurance and their court date, it gets reduced to $75. It's designed to be a strong incentive for people to get insurance, first of all, initially, and if they don't have it initially, to get it promptly after being caught. In general, I support laws of that nature. The problem is that it has a disproportionate impact on the poor, and that is something that needs to be addressed on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Ms. Flood?
So in my role as president of the NAACP, we put together a focus group to look at and address the transportation needs that disproportionately affect those working people, and looking at what the state is basically going to see as kind of a tax, a poll tax. When we look at legal financial obligations, we know that they can be the start of a spiraling out of control effect on our working population and our community as a whole. How do we look at this and say, what can we do? The $500 fine plus $500+ fine in many courts would result in being reduced down to a $25 administration fee. That, I think, should be the maximum fee there. The courts look to their fees in so many ways for support, and that adversely affects our most vulnerable populations.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Ms. Flood. What do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice, if any?
Communication. Lack of understanding, and the need to be able to commit to educating the public before they get to the courthouse door. Mentoring our young people to help them understand positive sides of the law before they're negative, before their first encounter is because they have gotten into trouble. Young people who get traffic infractions, and if that's their first interaction with the court, it's negative. It spirals out of control. If we can get our young people introduced to the law before that happens, we are also much stronger together in our community, and we can reduce the negative impacts that the justice system has.
Thank you. And Mr. Weaver?
I think the greatest obstacle to justice that I see on a day-to-day basis in my practice is the treating of mental health problems as a criminal problem. I have represented hundreds of people who have mental health issues ranging from minor to very severe, and the tendency of the courts is to treat people who commit crimes because of their mental illness as if they are fully functioning people. And I can't tell you how many times I've had situations where I've been representing someone where my goal was to convey to the prosecutor and to the judge that my client's behavior was directly related to mental health issues. And quite candidly, on many times I find myself running up against a brick wall in my ability to communicate that because the person is not willing to listen to it.
Thank you. Next question will begin with Mr. Weaver. What are the pros and cons of going to the bench as compared to practicing law?
I love trial work. I love the creative side of going to trial. As I said earlier, I did a trial this week, and it was a really fun trial to prepare for. I'm going to miss that. I'm not going to lie, but the Bremerton Municipal Court will be a new and important challenge. We need good quality people on the bench, and I'm looking forward to the new challenges.
Thank you. Ms. Flood?
I believe that significantly understanding that when you sit on the bench, you're not an advocate. When you're in your practice, you can take on issues that are challenging. You can take on things and be the voice in a way that is different. But as a judicial officer, it is still your responsibility to remember that we are here to serve the community. We are not here to serve ourselves. And with that, knowing that this is a long-term commitment and understanding the service and the servant leadership that's needed for Bremerton as a whole is the big difference, as well as ensuring due process, ensuring that those that come before you feel heard and feel that the justice system has served them.
Thank you. Ms. Flood, next question. What has been your greatest accomplishment in your legal career?
I'm going to take a personal on this one. About 2 years ago, my brother had a massive stroke. And I had to be in court in Illinois, in the circuit court. And as a lawyer, it's important that we do our research, that we find out the information before we make demands and make suggestions to our clients. And going into court there and understanding guardianship law, a very difficult area of law, elder law, and working with the courts there, as well as other legal counsel, because when I presented myself, I was allowed to appear on the special rule. But that was my greatest challenge, because not only was it personal, it was in a very difficult area of law that guided my career from that day forward.
Thank you. And Mr. Weaver?
Well, I could cite a variety of things. Earlier, I stated that I've argued 19 cases in the Washington Supreme Court, and I'm very proud of that work. But I think I'm going to select one of the jury trials that I did in approximately 2006, where I represented a woman on an attempted murder trial where I was convinced that she was not guilty. And I worked extremely hard on that case. It was a 3-week trial, and I presented, I cross-examined all of the state's witnesses vigorously and presented an extensive case in chief. I presented more witnesses than the state did, and I secured a not guilty verdict for my client that I truly believe was in the interest of justice, because I believe that my client was completely innocent. And that is very satisfying to hear the jury come back with that not guilty verdict when you've worked that hard. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Weaver, this will be our last question. As a prospective judge, what do you consider to be your greatest strength?
I think my greatest strength is my intellect and my understanding of the law. I have spent 28 years thoroughly saturating myself in everything that there is to know about criminal law. There is, as I said earlier, there's not going to be any issues that come before me that I'm unfamiliar with. And quite frankly, that more likely than not, I will have argued a similar issue in either the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. That is my greatest strength. I also have the ability to listen to people as they tell their stories and apply the law to those stories. I sit down with clients every day and do that, and that's essentially what I'll be doing as a judge. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Flood?
Can you ask the question again?
Yes, as a prospective judge, what do you consider your greatest strength to be?
My greatest strength as the prospective judge of Bremerton Municipal Court is my diversity in experience and background, and the fact that there's no sitting judge in the Kitsap County area with the experience that I bring. I have been a court-appointed special advocate. I've worked in Superior Court in civil and criminal matters, in district court in civil and criminal matters, in municipal courts in civil and criminal matters. Having a breadth of experience beyond criminal law is so important in this court. For 14 years, I've been doing the work at a higher jurisdictional level. Because of this, coming in, bringing that diversity and experience to our community is so key and vital in seeing change.
Thank you. As I said, that concludes our questions for this evening. Candidates, it's now time for your closing statements, and each of you, as a reminder, will have 90 seconds, and we'll begin with Ms. Flood.
I hope that after this forum, you can see that I am the people's choice for Bremerton Municipal Court. I have the breadth of experience, the legal knowledge, diversity of experience, and prior service as a pro tem judge to prepare me for this role. I am asking that you trust me with your vote. You can ensure that the work that I've done and that I will work to create a more accessible court system that addresses the root of why individuals are in court, which ultimately keeps our community safer and alleviates the burdens of our taxpayers. I think it's so important to know that my work with law enforcement, with the NAACP and other community partners speaks volume. I will be able to meet those individuals that come in front of me with understanding and respect and impartiality, because I have been a single mother. I'm a US veteran, and as a Black woman, my relationships in organizations and in the community as a whole show that I am the best person for this job. I am honored to have bipartisan support. Superior Court judges, Supreme Court judges, and businesses, and over 100 community members.
And that's time. Thank you. Mr. Weaver?
Experience matters. Qualifications matter. The reality is that Ms. Flood and I are both longtime residents of Kitsap County, and we're longtime lawyers. Both of us routinely appear in the courts of this county. Both of us are running as the most qualified person to take over for Judge Doctor. But the reality is that the Kitsap County judges and lawyers have spoken as to who is the most qualified candidate. I have the endorsement of 20 active and retired Kitsap County judges. I have In the Kitsap County Bar Association poll, I was judged to be the most qualified person to be the next Bremerton judge by a margin of over 4-1. I've been endorsed by Supreme Court Justice and Kitsap County residents Cheryl Gordon McLeod. I've been endorsed by Kitsap County Superior Court judges Kevin Hull, Jennifer Forbes, Bill Hauser, Michelle Adams, Sally Olson, Melissa Hemstreet, Jeffrey Bassett, retired Judge Jay Roof, retired Judge Anna Laurie, retired Judge Jeanette Dalton, retired Judge Russell Hartman. I've been endorsed by Bremerton Municipal Court Judge James Doctor, the person that we're both trying to replace. I've been endorsed by Port Orchard Municipal Court Judge Tim Drury and Bainbridge Island Judge Sarah McCullough. I've been endorsed by Kitsap County District Courts Claire Bradley, Jeffrey Yons, and Kevin Kelly. I ask you for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Voters, hopefully this forum has helped you choose a candidate. Ballots are arriving soon for the November 2nd general election, and the League is encouraging voters to return your ballots early. With thanks to Bremerton Kitsap Access Television, the League's forums are recorded, and links to the videos will soon be on our website at www.lwv-kitsap.org and also available at YouTube. BCAT will broadcast on Comcast Channel 12 and Wave Broadband Channel 3. So check your local listings for those that upcoming schedule. Most importantly, please encourage others to view the forum and to vote. We would also like to thank Kitsap Regional Library for helping us to publicize our general election forums. Thank you to our candidates for participating in our forum this evening. And thank you to each of our audience members for attending and for submitting such thoughtful questions. Please have a safe and pleasant evening. Thank you again. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.